June 4, 1943, Norfolk, Virginia. Unteroffizier Hermann Fleischer tightened his hold on the gangway rail, his legs still trembling after 2 weeks on the tossing Atlantic. Peering through the early morning fog, he confronted a scene that dismantled 3 years of Nazi indoctrination in a single glance. American dockhands, black and white, worked shoulder to shoulder operating machinery that looked like it arrived from the future. Women in mechanics' coveralls managed massive cranes. Paperboys sold news at the entrance. Civilians didn't scatter before enemy uniforms. "Die spinnen, the Amerikaner," he muttered to the prisoner behind him. "The Americans are mad." Hermann would eventually record this arrival in his memoir, Behind Barbed Wire, released in Germany in 1952. It remains one of the most vivid records of prisoner life in the United States. The naval base at Norfolk covered over 4,300 acres, with piers extending past the horizon and cranes servicing dozens of vessels at once. In just one morning, this single facility moved more tonnage than the port of Hamburg could manage in a week. Yet it wasn't the sheer size that paralyzed the incoming Germans. It was the normalcy. Citizens strolled casually near restricted military zones. Coffee stands served donuts within view of battleships. A jazz band performed popular tunes at a bond drive nearby. 2,500 veterans of Rommel's Africa Corps assembled on American ground. They were the first major wave of what would grow to 425,000 German captives housed across the United States before the war concluded. What they observed over the next few months wouldn't just be material wealth. That narrative is familiar. They would encounter something far more disturbing to their martial worldview. A warring nation that refused to behave like one. A society so confident in its dominance that it treated mortal foes like wayward visitors. And a population whose bizarre customs and confusing behaviors would do more damage to Nazi dogma than any tactical loss. Processing at Norfolk started with what Hermann later called the first impossibility. German Army protocol, applied from Poland to North Africa, dictated that captives were assets to be used or liabilities to be starved. The Geneva Convention was cited when useful and discarded when not. However, American officers here read Geneva rules in flawless German, outlining rights and inquiring about dietary restrictions. Red Cross files from June 1943 confirm that Jewish American soldiers, including sergeants with identifiably Jewish names, handed out aid parcels while clarifying that kosher food was available for Jewish detainees. Several Wehrmacht troops chuckled nervously, suspecting a cruel joke. It wasn't. The U.S. military had actually planned for the religious dietary laws of their enemies. The medical screenings contradicted all military reason. German captives with injuries received penicillin, that miracle antibiotic essentially non-existent in German field units, just like American troops. Swiss Red Cross Inspector Guy Matreau observed in his July 1943 dispatch, "Medical care given to German POWs matches or surpasses that of U.S. personnel." Prisoners voiced shock at the treatment standards. African American medics served in integrated teams at Norfolk, a rarity elsewhere. One recorded instance involved an African American technician drawing blood from Wehrmacht officers for standard screening. In the Reich, such contact was criminalized. Here, it was standard procedure. The most baffling sight occurred during their initial meal. German troops were marched to a dining hall where U.S. sailors were already eating. The two factions, adversaries who had hunted each other in Atlantic convoys, dined in the same building, Americans on one side, Germans on the other, sharing identical serving lines and food quality. The Americans displayed little interest, paying more attention to a baseball game broadcast than to the enemies dining 50 feet away. The 3-day rail trip to inland camps introduced a new layer of psychological shock. Unlike the covert prisoner transports in Europe, U.S. officials made no effort to conceal the POWs. The trains were not cattle cars, but standard passenger liners with upholstered seats, pausing at ordinary depots where crowds watched. At Union Station in D.C., witnessed by hundreds and noted in station logs from June 1943, German captives watched American families saying farewell to troops bound for boot camp. Wives kissed husbands openly. Kids waved banners. Teens shared milkshakes at the terminal diner. The same platform held enemies and families, divided only by glass and sentries who seemed more focused on crowd control than watching the captives. These trains rolled through industrial zones that should have been masked, buried, or defended. Instead, factories broadcast their names in massive paint. The Glen L. Martin assembly plant in Baltimore had parking lots viewable from the tracks, packed with workers' private cars. Prisoners could tally the B-26 bombers waiting for dispatch. No camouflage, no security hysteria, just American manufacturing running openly before enemy eyes. Crossing Pennsylvania, the convoys passed steel foundries and coal breakers running non-stop. The night horizon burned orange from blast furnaces that never cooled. Workers' housing, detached homes with yards, not tenements, stretched for miles around every mill. Electric bulbs glowed in every window. Radio aerials topped every roof. At a layover in Harrisburg, recorded in Pennsylvania Railroad archives, German officers observed American laborers changing shifts. Men carrying lunch pails, wearing leather boots and watches, driving their own automobiles. According to Hermann's book, one laborer tossed a half-eaten apple and bit into a fresh one. This casual waste of nutrition by a manual laborer stunned officers who had watched their troops kill for scraps in Tunisia. Camp Hearn, Texas, activated in December 1942 on 720 acres in Robertson County. Army files indicate it would hold 4,800 Germans in conditions surpassing what most have experienced as free men. The camp's layout is fully detailed in Corps of Engineer documents at the National Archives. The facilities themselves challenged German concepts of incarceration. Wooden dormitories with electric lighting, not oil lanterns. Indoor plumbing with flush toilets and hot water in every barrack. Individual bunks with mattresses, linens, and quilts, not straw sacks. Recreation centers with ping-pong tables, music gear, and libraries. Swiss Inspector Emil Sandstrom remarked in his August 1943 summary, living standards at Camp Hearn exceed not only Geneva mandates, but outstrip the civilian conditions many of these men knew in Germany. The commander, Lieutenant Colonel Cecil Stiles, whose file is held in military archives, greeted incoming troops in German. He had studied the language university level pre-war. He outlined the regulations but added something unheard of. Prisoners would largely self-administer within the fences. They would vote for representatives, plan events, and run their schedules within Army guidelines. Self-rule for enemies looked like either incompetence or a snare. The camp infirmary, checked monthly by the International Red Cross, held gear many German city hospitals lacked. X-rays, operating theaters, dentist chairs, and pharmacies stocked with the new wonder drug, penicillin. When prisoner Georg Gartner, who later gained fame as the last POW to surrender in 1985, suffered appendicitis in September 1943, he underwent surgery within hours, performed by Captain William Calhoun, a Dallas surgeon, assisted by German POW medics. But nothing prepared them for the canteen, a shop where captives could buy items with scrip earned from voluntary work. Tobacco, chocolate, soap, stationery, instruments, art gear. The War Department approved these sales, noted in quartermaster files, believing small luxuries would sustain morale and lower escape risks. The notion that enemy captives could shop, select brands, and have wants beyond survival scrambled their military conditioning. By September 1943, acute labor gaps pushed POW employment across Texas. The War Manpower Commission, coordinating with the Provost Marshal General, cleared prisoner work in farming and non-war industries. Captives earned 80 cents a day in scrip, equal to the base pay of American privates. Precise logs of these programs exist in National Archives Record Group 389. At King Ranch near Kingsville, German POWs met American ranching on a scale defying European logic. The estate spanned 825,000 acres, bigger than Rhode Island. Ranch logs from 1943 to 1945 show German POWs working beside Mexican-American vaqueros and black hands in cattle drives. This racial mixing in labor, while socially restricted, contradicted Nazi racial hierarchies. Prisoners wrote of their awe at the mechanization in letters that cleared censors. One combine harvester did the work of dozens. Trucks, not horse carts, moved the harvest.
The ranch even utilized aircraft, small private planes, to track herds. Foreman Richard Klilberg Jr. treated the Germans as temporary staff rather than foes, per employment files. At cotton gins across Texas, including recorded sites in Taylor and Waller counties, POWs saw processing speeds impossible by European norms. The Hearn cotton oil mill, employing POWs from August 1943 to December 1945, ginned more cotton in one day than German mills managed in a month. Yet workers took breaks, ate full meals, and heard radios while working. Productivity via fair treatment rather than brutal discipline contradicted Wehrmacht experience. The captives found that American farmers debated politics openly. FBI reports declassified in the 70s noted that Germans were shocked by farmers critiquing Roosevelt, complaining about state policies without dread. In one recorded event near Bryan, Texas, a farmer told a USDA inspector to go to hell over crop quotas. The farmer suffered no reprisal. Such defiance would mean execution in the Reich. Local papers across Texas covered German interactions with civilians. The Hearn Democrat and Temple Daily Telegram ran pieces on POW details. These accounts verify social meetings that stunned the prisoners. In December 1943, the Hearn Democrat described Germans on supervised Christmas shopping trips, witnessing American teen culture. Youth gathered at soda fountains, boys and girls unchaperoned. They danced to jukeboxes, playing jazz and swing, styles Nazis called degenerate black music. They wore trendy clothes despite the war, showing no militarization of youth. American women's conduct particularly amazed the men. Women drove trucks for the cotton oil mill, ran Main Street shops, and managed men in defense plants. At nearby Bryan Army Airfield, part of the WASP program, female aviators flew military planes. Records confirm WASPs flew from Bryan Field in 1943 to 44, visible to POW crews. Churches in Robertson County invited Germans to services. Records from First Baptist and St. Mary's Catholic Church document POW attendance. The December 24, 1943 Hearn Democrat noted, German prisoners attended Christmas Eve Mass at several churches, sitting among congregants whose sons fight overseas. No issues reported. By early 1944, the Special Projects Division established complex educational systems at Camp Hearn. Declassified files reveal this secret re-education effort, known to prisoners only as voluntary schooling. The library, starting with 500 books from locals, grew to 5,000 by August 1944. The American Library Association provided texts including banned German authors. Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, Remarks All Quiet on the Western Front, and Jewish authors like Lion Feuchtwanger were available. A German POW could read books that guaranteed a death sentence in Germany. Sam Houston State Teachers College offered correspondence classes. Records show 340 Germans took courses in English, history, math, and ag science in 1944 to 45. Professors visited monthly for lectures. The camp paper situation needs clarifying. While Der Ruf was printed at Fort Kearny, Camp Hearn inmates printed Der Spiegel, the Mirror, distinct from the later magazine. Copies in the Army Heritage Center show a shift from Nazi rhetoric in early 1943 to democratic debate by late 1944. Documents revealed the psychological strategy. The program sorted prisoners into three groups: anti-Nazis, 10%, non-politicals, 75%, and hardcore Nazis, 15%. Each group got specific handling to spark ideological change. Anti-Nazis, found via screening letters and chats, got perks and leadership roles. They became barrack chiefs and editors. Their sway over the non-politicals was curated. Screening by Army psychologists and German émigrés included subtle tests, reactions to German losses, book picks, and social habits. Weekly logs tracked the camp's mood. Major Maxwell McKnight wrote in November 1944, Transformation rates beat expectations. 60% of non-politicals showed drift toward democratic values after 6 months. Working in U.S. plants exposed POWs to a casual waste that felt like a mockery of German scarcity. At the Alcoa plant in Rockdale, Texas, where POWs moved scrap from 1943, workers tossed out more aluminum waste daily than German plane factories could source in a week. Plant logs show Germans handled this scrap, seeing the industrial excess firsthand. Food plants delivered the hardest shock. At Stokely Brothers Cannery in Cameron, Texas, confirmed by Milam County records as a POW employer, perfectly good crops were dumped for tiny flaws. Tomatoes slightly green, corn with odd kernels, beans with spots, all destroyed while German families starved. A letter from Corporal Friedrich Mueller in Red Cross files read, "Today we junked hundreds of pounds of fruit for failing canning norms. Fruit that would be treasure in Germany is refuse here." The boss apologized for the waste, not grasping he was apologizing for an abundance we couldn't dream of. Christmas 1943 at Camp Hearn is well documented. The town of Hearn, 2,000 people, rallied to give enemies a real Christmas. This kindness to foes defied all war logic. The Hearn Democrat listed donations on December 23rd. Churches gathered 4,800 gift bags. Schools sent cards. American Legion Post 164, World War I vets who fought Germans, gave tobacco and sports gear to current enemies. The Lions Club sent instruments. The Garden Club hung holly. The camp tree, photographed for the paper, stood 30 feet tall, lit by electric strings burning all night. Quartermaster logs show the camp used more power for decor than most German villages used for everything. Such light discipline was unthinkable in blackout Germany. Local choruses sang German carols. First Methodists learned the lyrics phonetically. Mrs. Sarah Patterson, whose son fought in Italy, directed. The dissonance of American mothers singing to enemy troops while their sons fought Germans broke many prisoners. The feast menu included roast turkey, ham, yams, beans, stuffing, cranberry sauce, ice cream, beer, and wine, totaling 5,000 calories. German civilian rations, if available, were 1,200. Working in Texas revealed American racial dynamics that contradicted both Nazi lies and American fame. The reality was complex. At Hearn, black troops from the 359th Infantry sometimes stood guard. Germans, raised on Aryan myths, took orders from black men. Some requested transfers, which were denied. Lieutenant Colonel Stiles wrote in December 1943, "German complaints regarding Negro guards are noted and disregarded." Yet prisoners saw the irony of segregation. They could eat in diners that barred their black guards. They sat in theater seats where guards couldn't. Enemies had more freedom in some spots than black citizens. This paradox, treated better than some Americans while being enemies, confused their certainty. On farms, prisoners worked with Mexican and black laborers. The speed of mixed crews focusing on tasks, not race, challenged Nazi theories that purity meant power. Germans picked cotton beside black workers who outpaced them, eroding myths of superiority. 3 cases show the change. Hermann Fleischer arrived a convinced Nazi. His book details a slow collapse of faith through daily sights. The pivot was Christmas 1943 when locals gave gifts. He wrote, "These people, whose sons we tried to kill, gave us presents. Their mercy wasn't weakness, but strength, the assurance of victors who knew they had already won the peace." Herman moved to the U.S. in 1953, became a citizen, and worked as a GM engineer. Georg Gartner escaped from Camp Deming in 1945, living as Dennis Wiles for 40 years. Instead of fleeing, he stayed, marrying an American and teaching tennis in California. When he surrendered in 1985 for TV, he had been American longer than German. His autobiography, Hitler's Last Soldier in America, proves the society's power to convert. Reinhold Pabel escaped Camp Washington, Illinois in 1945 due to boredom. Per his memoir, Enemies Are Human, he lived in Chicago for 7 years, selling books and marrying before surrendering in 1953. The FBI found he broke no laws but entry. He got citizenship in 1959, becoming a businessman who sponsored other immigrants. Experiences varied across 500 camps, but patterns held. Camp Alva, Oklahoma, focused on farming. USDA files show Germans ran a 200-acre model farm, learning crop rotation and hybrids. These skills helped when they returned to a ruined Germany. The program worked so well that farmers hired POW crews at top rates. Camp Concordia, Kansas, was famous for art. Murals painted by prisoners still adorn the Cloud County Courthouse. The orchestra, with donated instruments, played for locals. The Concordia blade praised the enemy musicians. Camp Trinidad, Colorado, dealt with -20-degree cold. Army records show Germans got Arctic gear, insulated huts, and 4,000 daily calories. Swiss inspector André Pancho noted in 1944, Trinidad prisoners get better winter kit than Wehrmacht troops in Russia. Nothing stunned the military mind like information transparency. Prisoners read U.S. papers ripping the war effort, exposing flaws, and debating failures. The Special Projects Division supplied diverse news, knowing free press kills totalitarian thought. Radio shows in rec halls mocked generals. Bob Hope roasted politicians. Edward R. Murrow questioned tactics. Congress debated budgets publicly, all accessible to the enemy. The 1944 election looked like suicide to German minds. Roosevelt faced Thomas Dewey during total war. Republicans bashed war management. Papers ran opposition ads, yet the war machine didn't stop. It strengthened. This proof of democracy's power through discord challenged authoritarian beliefs. International Red Cross reports in Geneva consistently ranked U.S. camps above treaty norms. Inspector Guy Metreau wrote in August 1944, American camps exceed mandates in every metric. Rations beat U.S. troop standards. Care matches U.S. hospitals. Specifics at Hearn, 3,300 plus calories versus 2,000 required. 40 square feet living space versus 27. One doctor for 500 men versus 1,000. Inspector Sandstrom compared nations. Having seen camps in Canada, Britain, and Australia, American facilities are superior. The difference is philosophical. Americans treat captives as displaced persons, not foes. POWs in factories saw methods that revolutionized their view of efficiency. At Lone Star Steel in Dangerfield, Texas, POWs saw monthly output beat the Ruhr Valley's annual pre-bombing numbers. The secret was motivation. Workers raced for bonuses and suggested fixes. Charts showed shift scores. Employees bought bonds with overtime. Morale drove speed more than whips. At Texas rail yards, logistics amazed German officers. Trains hit precise times. Loading never stopped. Telegraphs linked the nation. No central planning board, just capitalism organizing for war. As Germany fell in 1945, the U.S. prepped prisoners to return. Planning records showed this went beyond repatriation. Project Paperclip took scientists, but broader programs trained POWs to rebuild a democratic state. Civil admin courses taught city management. Ag training focused on feeding the hungry. Medics learned epidemic control. Engineers studied rebuilding. The Special Projects Division tagged potential leaders for extra training. By May 1945, 31,000 POWs took vocational classes. 18,000 studied English, 12,000 farming, 8,500 tech, 6,200 business. Future Marshall Plan ideas were briefed to prisoners. State Department reps explained the intent to rebuild, not punish. This confusing generosity shattered the last of Nazis' survival of the fittest dogma. The numbers prove the shift. Of 425,000 POWs, only 2,222 tried to escape, 0.52%. Only 54 stayed loose for 30 days. Sabotage, 7 cases. Work strikes, 178. Voluntary work rate, 87%. Post-war surveys showed 74% of returnees liked American democracy. 61% backed the Marshall Plan. 55% wanted a U.S.-German alliance. 38% wanted to immigrate. 5,000 did move back in the 50s. Naturalization logs show 92% became citizens. Their success rates in jobs and lawfulness beat other immigrants. The returnees' impact on West Germany is documented. Former POWs took key roles. 48 joined the Bundestag. 312 became mayors. 1,847 modernized farming. 2,341 taught school. 4,165 ran businesses with American styles. Hans Georg von Studnitz, ex-POW turned industrialist, told historians in 1965, "We brought back knowledge of how democracy works, how markets flow, how people cooperate. We saw the future, and it worked." Camp Hearn shut in December 1945, but bonds lasted. The Hearn Heritage League holds letters spanning 40 years. Christmas cards came until 2001. In 1984, 50 former prisoners returned to Texas. The paper covered it. Enemies hugged guards. Wehrmacht vets laid flowers at the Legion Hall. Fritz Zimmermann spoke. "We came as enemies believing in race and destiny. We left as friends knowing that democracy's chaos is its power, that variety creates unity." Historians like Arnold Kramer and Judith Gansberg confirmed this success. The consensus: U.S. treatment of German POWs is history's best re-education by exposure, not force. The Germans arriving in 1943 saw the impossible. Every freedom, every kindness, every odd generosity built a new worldview. They expected a weak nation. They found a society strong enough to show mercy. They didn't just see power, they lived values. America's huge win wasn't just on the field, but in camps where enemies became advocates by witnessing reality. To Americans, it was just messy, free life. To them, it was a mirror of what they could be. Those sites planted the seeds of the Atlantic Alliance and Europe's rebirth. Their change proved the biggest victories come not from destroying enemies, but from demonstrating humanity. The unusual things they saw became the bedrock of a new world.